The story of the last Nasrid Sultans of Granada is a tale of great drama and historical significance. It is set in the final years of Muslim rule in the Iberian Peninsula, a period often called Al-Andalus. For centuries, this land had been a vibrant center of culture, science, and art under various Muslim dynasties. The Nasrid dynasty, ruling from the magnificent city of Granada, was the last of these. Their kingdom was a final beacon of a civilization that had once stretched across most of Spain and Portugal. This video will explore the lives and reigns of some of the last rulers, particularly Muhammad XI and Abu al-Hasan Ali, whose actions unfolded during the final turbulent decades before the kingdom's fall in 1492. We will journey back to the 15th century, a time of profound change in Spain. The Christian kingdoms of Castile and Aragon were growing stronger and more unified. They saw the Muslim kingdom of Granada as a foreign presence that needed to be removed. Inside Granada, the Nasrid court was a place of intrigue, power struggles, and family rivalries. The sultans who sat on the throne had to navigate these dangerous internal politics while also defending their borders from constant external threats. Their decisions, born out of ambition, desperation, or love for their kingdom, would ultimately shape the final chapter of Al-Andalus and set the stage for the birth of modern Spain. Understanding this period is crucial to understanding the complex history of Spain. It is a story not just of kings and queens, but of people from different faiths living together, sometimes in peace and sometimes in conflict. The fall of Granada was not merely a military conquest, it was a profound cultural and religious turning point. It marked the end of nearly 800 years of Muslim presence in the peninsula, and the beginning of a new unified Christian Spain that would soon expand its influence across the globe. The legacy of the Nasrids and their beautiful capital city continues to fascinate and inspire people to this day. As we delve into the lives of these last sultans, we will see how their personal strengths and weaknesses had a direct impact on the fate of their kingdom. We will examine the difficult choices they faced and the pressures that bore down on them from all sides. From the gilded halls of the Alhambra Palace to the rugged battlefields along the frontier, their story is a powerful reminder of how history is shaped by individuals caught in the great currents of their time. It is a story of resistance, of a culture trying to survive against overwhelming odds, and of the final poignant moments of a once great power. The Nasrid dynasty came to power in the 13th century, a time when other Muslim states in Iberia were collapsing. Its founder, Muhammad I, established his capital in Granada. He was a clever ruler who managed to create a stable kingdom in the southeastern corner of the peninsula. He did this through a combination of military skill and careful diplomacy. Most importantly, he agreed to become a vassal of the powerful Christian kingdom of Castile. This meant that Granada had to pay a large annual tribute in gold to Castile. This tribute, called the Parias, was a heavy burden, but it bought the kingdom precious time and a measure of security for many years. For over 2 centuries, the Nasrid Sultans ruled from Granada. They oversaw a period of incredible artistic and architectural achievement. The most famous example of their legacy is the Alhambra Palace, a breathtaking complex of courtyards, halls, and gardens that is considered a masterpiece of Islamic art. The kingdom became a refuge for Muslims fleeing the Christian reconquest, known as the Reconquista. This influx of skilled artisans, scholars, and soldiers helped Granada to flourish. The city became a vibrant center of trade, producing fine silks, ceramics, and metalwork that were prized throughout the Mediterranean world. Despite its cultural brilliance, the Kingdom of Granada was always in a fragile position. It was a small Muslim state surrounded by much larger and increasingly aggressive Christian neighbors. Its survival depended on a delicate balance of power. The sultans had to be skilled diplomats, playing the Christian kingdoms of Castile and Aragon against each other. They also formed alliances with Muslim powers in North Africa, such as the Marinid dynasty in Morocco. These alliances provided military support, but they could also draw Granada into wider conflicts. The kingdom was like a small boat navigating a stormy sea, constantly at risk of being overwhelmed. The later years of the Nasrid dynasty, in the 15th century, were marked by increasing instability. The system of paying tribute to Castile began to break down as the Christian kingdoms grew more determined to conquer Granada entirely. At the same time, the Nasrid royal family was torn apart by internal rivalries. Different factions within the court fought for control of the throne. This infighting weakened the kingdom from within, making it much more vulnerable to its external enemies. It was into this dangerous and volatile world that the last sultans, including Muhammad XI and Abu al-Hassan, would step, each trying to secure their power and save their kingdom. Muhammad XI, often known as El Chiquito, or the Little One in Spanish chronicles, was a figure whose reign was defined by the intense power struggles within the Nasrid court. He was the son of a previous sultan, Muhammad VIII, and his claim to the throne placed him in direct opposition to his own relatives. His time as sultan was not a continuous, stable rule. Instead, he held power briefly and precariously on two separate occasions during the mid-15th century, around the 1450s. His reign was a perfect example of the internal divisions that were tearing the kingdom apart. He was more of a pawn in a larger game than a powerful monarch in his own right. His main rival was his uncle Saad, who also had ambitions for the throne. The city of Granada and its powerful families were divided in their loyalties. Some supported Muhammad XI, while others backed Saad. This rivalry led to civil war within the kingdom. Battles were fought not just against the Christians on the frontier, but between Muslim factions in the streets of Granada itself. This constant conflict drained the kingdom's resources and diverted attention from the growing threat posed by Castile. Muhammad XI's ability to rule depended entirely on which faction was stronger at any given moment, making his position incredibly insecure. Muhammad XI's story highlights the critical role played by powerful noble families in Granada, such as the Abencerrages and the Zegris. These clans were kingmakers, and their support could make or break a sultan. Muhammad XI was supported by the Abencerrages, a very influential family. However, when their fortunes changed or their rivals gained the upper hand, his own power crumbled. His first reign ended when his uncle Saad successfully seized the throne. He was forced to flee and seek refuge, waiting for an opportunity to return. His life was one of constant uncertainty, always looking over his shoulder for the next threat. Ultimately, Muhammad XI's story ends in tragedy. After being briefly restored to power, he was finally defeated and captured by his rivals. According to some accounts, he was executed within the walls of the Alhambra itself, a grim end for a man who had twice worn the Sultan's crown. His reign is important not for its great achievements, but as a stark warning. It showed how the deep internal divisions and personal ambitions within the Nasrid elite were fatally weakening Granada. The kingdom was consuming itself from within, making the job of its external enemies much, much easier. The Kingdom of Granada in the 15th century was a place of deep and dangerous divisions. The most significant problem was the constant infighting within the Nasrid royal family itself. The line of succession was not always clear, and it was common for brothers, uncles, and nephews to fight each other for the throne. This led to a series of civil wars that pitted sultan against anti-sultan. These conflicts were not just about personal ambition. They were also fueled by powerful court factions and noble families who backed different candidates. These families hoped to gain power and influence by placing their chosen ruler on the throne. Two of the most famous rival families were the Abencerrages and the Zegris. These were powerful clans with great wealth, private armies, and influence over different parts of the city and the kingdom. Their rivalry became legendary and was a major source of instability. When one family supported the ruling sultan, the other would often plot against him, sometimes backing a rival claimant to the throne. This constant intrigue turned the Alhambra palace into a nest of spies and conspiracies. A sultan could never be sure who to trust, and a single misstep could lead to his overthrow or assassination. These internal struggles had devastating consequences for the kingdom as a whole. While the nobles and royals fought among themselves in Granada, the defense of the frontiers was often neglected. Soldiers and resources that should have been used to fight the Christian armies were instead used in civil wars. The kingdom was unable to present a united front against its main enemy. The Christian rulers of Castile were well aware of these divisions and often exploited them. They would support one Nasrid faction against another, providing money or military aid to keep the civil war going, which further weakened the Muslim state. Furthermore, the constant political instability affected the common people of Granada. The economy suffered as trade routes were disrupted, and taxes were raised to pay for the internal wars. The loyalty of the people to their rulers was tested. Some citizens and local governors in other towns grew tired of the chaos in the capital and began to act more independently. This fragmentation of power made it even harder for any sultan to rule effectively. By the time Abu al-Hasan came to power, the kingdom was already deeply fractured, a state of affairs that had been developing for decades. Before the dramatic rise of Abu al-Hasan Ali, another figure shaped the destiny of the last Muslim kingdom in Iberia, Abu Nasr Sa'd. Known in Christian chronicles as Chiriza, Sa'd's reign marked a brief but telling chapter in the long decline of Nasrid Granada. Born into the fractious Nasrid dynasty, Abu Nasr Sa'd came to power in the early 1450s amid the chaos of civil war. His predecessor, Muhammad XI, had been overthrown after a series of military failures and palace intrigues. Sa'd's own claim to the throne was far from secure. Like many Nasrid sultans, he owed his elevation as much to shifting alliances among the noble families as to any royal lineage. He was seen as a compromise candidate, someone who might unite the rival Aben Shirajes and Zegris, at least temporarily. Sa'd's reign was defined by constant instability and the ever-present threat from Castile. He was a cautious ruler, more inclined to negotiate than to fight. Sa'd agreed to pay tribute to the Christian kings, hoping to buy peace and buy time for his divided kingdom. However, this policy was deeply unpopular with many Granadans who saw it as a humiliating surrender of their independence and pride. Despite his efforts, Sa'd's position was always precarious. He struggled to keep the support of the powerful noble families, who resented his attempts to centralize authority and limit their influence. His court was a web of conspiracies, with rivals waiting for any sign of weakness. In a kingdom where betrayal was common currency, Sa'd was forced to watch his back at all times. One of the most significant events of his reign was the brief recovery of Gibraltar in 1462, a symbolic victory that raised hopes for a Nasrid revival. But the reality was less triumphant. The Christian armies of Castile and Aragon continued to press on Granada's borders, and internal divisions remained unresolved. Sa'd's reign ended as it had begun, with intrigue and betrayal. He was eventually deposed and forced into exile. But even in defeat, Sa'd's story highlighted the tragic cycle of the Nasrid dynasty, a constant struggle for survival, torn between the ambitions of its rulers and the relentless advance of its enemies. Abu Nasr Sa'd's time on the throne was brief, but his reign was a telling prelude to the even greater dramas that would soon engulf Granada. His struggles set the stage for the rise of Abu al-Hasan Ali and the final act of the Nasrid dynasty's long and turbulent history. Abu al-Hasan Ali, known to the Spanish as Muli Hatsen, was one of the last truly powerful sultans of Granada. He ascended to the throne in 1464, inheriting a kingdom that was already weakened by the internal conflicts that had defined his predecessors' reigns, including that of Muhammad XI. Abu al-Hasan was a different kind of ruler. He was an experienced and formidable military commander, known for his courage and his aggressive approach to defending his kingdom's borders. He was not content to simply pay tribute to Castile and hope for peace. Instead, he believed in meeting force with force. And, he actually launched numerous raids into Christian territory to show Granada's strength. His reign was marked by a renewed sense of purpose and a desire to restore Granada's pride. In the early years of his rule, he managed to bring a degree of stability to the kingdom. He was a strong leader who could command the respect of his soldiers and many of the noble families. However, his personal life would become a source of great trouble and would ultimately contribute to the kingdom's downfall. He had a wife from the Nasrid royal family, Aisha, who was the mother of his son and heir Muhammad, later known as Boabdil. But Abu al-Hasan fell deeply in love with a Christian captive who had converted to Islam, named Isabel de Solis, whom he renamed Zoraya. This relationship caused a major scandal in the court of the Alhambra. Abu al-Hasan favored Zoraya and the children he had with her over his first wife, Aisha, and her son, Boabdil. This created a deep rift within the royal family. Aisha was a proud and ambitious woman who feared that her son would be pushed aside and that Zoraya's sons would inherit the throne. She began to plot against her husband, gathering support from the noble families who were rivals of Zoraya's supporters, particularly the Abencherrages. The palace became divided into two camps, those who supported Abu al-Hasan and Zoraya, and those who supported Aisha and Boabdil. This family drama was not just a private matter, it had severe political consequences. It reignited the destructive civil wars that had plagued Granada in the past. While Abu al-Hasan was away fighting the Castilians, Aisha and her supporters staged a coup in Granada and placed her young son, Boabdil, on the throne. This meant that at a time when Granada faced its greatest external threat, the newly unified and powerful kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, it was once again split into two warring factions. Abu al-Hasan had to fight not only the Christians but also his own son for control of his kingdom. While the Nasrid court was consumed by its internal dramas, the world outside Granada was changing rapidly and, honestly, dangerously. The most significant development was the marriage of Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand II of Aragon in 1469. This union brought together the two largest and most powerful Christian kingdoms in Spain. For the first time, Granada faced a single, unified, and incredibly determined enemy. Isabella and Ferdinand, who became known as the Catholic monarchs, shared a common goal to complete the Reconquista and bring the entire Iberian Peninsula under Christian rule. Their reign marked the beginning of the end for the last Muslim kingdom in Spain. The Catholic monarchs were formidable rulers. They centralized power, reformed their armies, and filled their treasury. They were able to raise and equip a much larger and more modern military force than Granada could ever hope to match. Their army included soldiers from all over Spain and even mercenaries from other parts of Europe. They also made effective use of new military technology, especially artillery. Their powerful cannons were capable of breaking down the walls of the fortified cities and castles that had protected Granada for centuries. The military balance of power had shifted decisively in favor of Castile and Aragon. The diplomatic situation had also turned against Granada. For centuries, the Nasrids had survived by playing their enemies against each other. They could make an alliance with Aragon to counter a threat from Castile, or seek help from the Muslim kingdoms in North Africa. But now, with Castile and Aragon united, that strategy was no longer possible. Furthermore, the powers in North Africa were themselves dealing with their own problems and were less able and willing to send significant aid to Granada. The kingdom was diplomatically isolated, left to face the might of the combined Spanish monarchies alone. The pressure on Granada was relentless. The Christian forces began to systematically conquer the towns and fortresses along the frontier. They adopted a slow and steady strategy of strangulation, capturing one stronghold at a time, cutting off supply routes, and gradually tightening the noose around the capital city. Each town that fell was a blow to Granada's morale and a loss of valuable resources and manpower. The sultans faced an impossible situation. They were fighting a war on multiple fronts against the powerful Christian army outside their borders and against their own family rivals within them. The final war for Granada did not begin by accident. It was triggered by a bold and defiant act by Sultan Abu al-Hasan. For years, Granada had paid a tribute to the Kingdom of Castile as a condition of peace. However, by the late 1470s and early 1480s, Abu al-Hasan felt that Granada was strong enough, or perhaps he was simply tired of the humiliation of paying. When ambassadors from Ferdinand and Isabella arrived at the Alhambra to demand the overdue payment, the Sultan gave them a now famous and defiant reply. He reportedly told them that the mints in Granada no longer coined gold, but now forged steel for spearheads and swords. This was a direct challenge, a declaration that Granada would no longer be a subordinate state. Abu al-Hasan followed up his words with action. In late 1481, he led a surprise attack on the Christian frontier town of Zahara. His forces stormed the town, capturing its fortress and taking its population captive. From a military perspective, it was a successful raid, a show of force that was typical of the frontier warfare of the time. However, in the charged political climate created by the Catholic monarchs, this attack was seen as an outrageous provocation. It was the excuse that Ferdinand and Isabella had been waiting for. The Christian response was swift and retaliatory. A few months later, in early 1482, a group of Castilian knights led a daring raid of their own and captured the strategically important Nasrid fortress of Alhama. Alhama was located deep within Granadan territory, very close to the capital itself. Its loss was a huge military and psychological blow to the Nasrids. Abu al-Hasan immediately tried to recapture the fortress, leading his army to besiege it. But he was unsuccessful. The loss of Alhama was seen as a terrible omen throughout the kingdom, and a popular ballad lamented, "Ay de mi Alhama," or "Woe is me Alhama." The capture of Zahara and the subsequent fall of Alhama marked the beginning of the Granada War, the final conflict that would last for 10 years, from 1482 to 1492. The initial act of defiance by Abu al-Hasan, intended to project strength, had backfired completely. It gave the Catholic monarchs the perfect justification to launch a full-scale holy war or crusade to conquer the entire kingdom. The war they launched was not just another frontier skirmish. It was a total war of conquest, fought with a determination and on a scale that Granada had never before faced. The Sultan's gamble had set his kingdom on a path to its ultimate destruction. The Granada War was a long and grueling conflict that slowly chipped away at the Nasrid kingdom. The internal divisions within Granada played directly into the hands of Ferdinand and Isabella. Soon after the war began, Abu al-Hasan's son, Boabdil, rebelled against him and declared himself Sultan in Granada, with the help of his mother Aixa and the Abencerrages faction. This meant that the kingdom was split, with Abu al-Hasan controlling one part and Boabdil another. For a time, there was even a third faction led by Abu al-Hasan's brother, al-Zagal. The Muslims were fighting a three-way civil war while also trying to fight the invading Christians. In 1483, a disaster struck the Nasrid cause. Boabdil, eager to prove himself a great warrior, led an army to attack the Christian town of Lucena. The attack was a failure, and Boabdil himself was captured by the Castilian forces. This was a golden opportunity for Ferdinand and Isabella. Instead of keeping him locked away, they made a clever political move. They treated him as a guest, signed a secret pact with him, and then released him. In exchange for his freedom, Boabdil agreed to rule Granada as a vassal of the Catholic monarchs and to wage war against his own father and uncle. He became a pawn in their game, helping them to conquer his own kingdom. With Boabdil creating chaos from within, the Christian armies made steady progress. They used their powerful artillery to batter down the walls of town after town. They conquered the major port city of Malaga in 1487 after a brutal siege. The fall of Malaga was a devastating blow, as it cut Granada off from any potential help from North Africa. Abu al-Hassan, old and losing his sight, had died a few years earlier, and his tough brother al-Zagal put up a fierce resistance, but he could not stop the relentless Christian advance. Eventually, even al-Zagal was forced to surrender his part of the kingdom, leaving Boabdil as the sole ruler of a tiny territory that consisted of little more than the city of Granada itself. By 1491, the city of Granada was completely surrounded. The Christian army built a massive military camp, a virtual city named Santa Fe, or Holy Faith, on the plains outside Granada, to show they would not leave until the city surrendered. Inside Granada, the people were starving. There was no hope of rescue. Boabdil, the last sultan, had no choice but to negotiate a surrender. On January 2nd, 1492, the terms of the treaty came into effect. Boabdil handed over the keys of the city to Ferdinand and Isabella. Christian soldiers entered the Alhambra, and the banner of Castile was raised over its highest tower. After nearly 800 years, Muslim rule in the Iberian Peninsula was over.